Hey everyone, AOC knows why young people are driving the socialist trend in the Democratic Party.
And so I think right now the electorate is also changing too. If I'm not mistaken, I think that millennials and Gen Z combined for the first time are eclipsing the number of baby boomers at the polls. And so I think some of this is also generational. I think young people overall feel a tremendous amount of betrayal about the world that we've been left with.
I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and what is she talking about? Betrayed? Betrayed? These are young people who are living in one of the freest, wealthiest, most technologically advanced countries in the world, indeed in human history, and they feel betrayed by what? They should be grateful every single day they're living in the United States of America. Now let's consider some of the broad evidence economically. Last 10 or 15 years, the US economy has grown markedly faster than the economies of other advanced Western democracies. We have left Canada, UK, Japan in the dust. Nominal per capita GDP in the United States now something like $90,000 a year. In Western Europe, it's $50,000 or $60,000 a year. Who would really, in sheer economic terms, want to live in one of those places rather than the United States? Or let's look at unemployment. During the financial crisis, spikes quite high. Obviously, it's higher than places like Japan and Germany, but then it recovers and it goes lower than the so-called OECD countries, kind of a pure advanced Western countries. Spikes again. During the pandemic, we recover more quickly than other places, and our unemployment rate has been quite low for some time now, and lower again than those OECD countries, lower than our peer countries. Or we can compare the United States to a specific, more socialistic country in Western Europe, France, for instance. Our per capita GDP is higher. Our economic growth is higher. Our unemployment is lower. Our labor productivity is higher. Our levels of innovation, higher. Why would you want to go from the country that's more dynamic if you're a young person to the country that is more stagnant? The economy in France this year is projected to grow at just a 0.7% annual rate. How about young people in particular? I don't want to deny that there are economic challenges, obviously, but you know what? There have been for every single generation in America's national life. Now, if you look at self-reporting about economic satisfaction, the number for younger people is lower than older people, not by a huge amount. Take a look at this data. This is from a Federal Reserve report, shows that people aged 18 to 29, 66% say they're doing okay or living comfortably. That's lower than people over age 60 at 84%. But you look at the change here since the pandemic, it's down 1 point, which is not a huge amount, 30 to 44, down 5 points, but 67% say they're doing okay or living comfortably. But that comparison between young people today and old people today is not the most telling one, because you know what? Young people are going to get older, they're going to get more established, they're going to earn more money, and eventually one day they'll be over age 60 as well, and probably feeling better about the prospects than they do right now. The key comparison is, how does the youth cohort today compare to past youth cohorts? And by that measure, looking specifically at millennials, we're doing pretty well. Here's a study published by the Federal Reserve. Title: Has Intergenerational Progress Stalled Economic Growth Over 5 Generations of Americans? The abstract says, we find that each of the past 4 generations of Americans was better off than the previous one using a post-tax, post-transfer income measure constructed annually from 1963 to 2022. At age 36 to 40, millennials had a real median household income that was 18% higher than that of the previous generation at the same age. This rate of intergenerational progress was slower than that experienced by the silent generation and baby boomers, but similar to that experienced by Generation X. Slower progress for Generation X and millennials is due to their stalled growth in work hours. Holding work hours constant, they experienced a greater intergenerational increase in real market income than baby boomers. Doesn't really accord with the idea that young people have been betrayed, does it? Neither does this Pew study. Now, grain of salt, this is from 2018, prior to the pandemic. Headline: Young adult households are earning more than most older Americans did at the same age. Quote, the median adjusted income in a household headed by a millennial was $69,000 in 2017. That is a higher figure than for nearly every other year on record apart from around 2000. Now, after that, obviously the pandemic was a major disruption, but wage growth has been quite strong since then. Here's data from the St. Louis Fed. Headline: Millennials and older Gen Zers made significant wealth gains in 2022. Younger families in the U.S. made remarkable gains in median wealth in 2022, according to our analysis. We found that the median wealth of older millennials was 37% above expectations. The wealth of younger millennials and older Gen Zers was a similar 39% above expectations. It's also worth noting that young people engage in a disproportionate amount of travel for leisure. They are drawn to premium products and brands. In the United States, they are the most educated generation ever. This does not sound like degradation and decline. This is not Dickensian England. By the way, speaking of education, there's still a significant wage premium for college graduates. So the idea that you're going to go to college and inherently necessarily get nothing from it is not true. That does happen, obviously, in some cases, but in general, you're going to get a higher wage if you graduate from college. Then you can look at the most elemental indicator. Young people today are going to live longer than any prior generation of Americans because they are the beneficiaries of these amazing advances in health and medicine. So all that sounds pretty great, even if AOC thinks all is doom and gloom. Now, again, as I said a few minutes ago, this is not to suggest that everything is fine. Obviously, there are problems. The price of housing is a huge one. Why is the price of housing so expensive? Well, because we don't have enough supply to meet the demand. Why do we not have enough supply? Well, because there are so many rules and regulations that discourage building. Is AOC anti-regulation? Does she want to roll back these rules that are stopping developers from building more housing, which would send the price of housing down? No, of course not. And by the way, young people are also screwed by the way our entitlement system works. We subsidize old people by taxing the payrolls of young people. Does AOC oppose that? No, she doesn't oppose that either. So in short, whatever the inadequacies of our system, would you trade it for the system of any other country around the world, especially a socialist system? No, of course not. But that's the snake oil that the Democratic Socialists are trying to sell young people to their shame. Hey, by the way, do yourself a favor. Comment, like, subscribe. I promise you won't regret it. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.